All right. We are now live on our Facebook page as well. Hi, folks. We already got a good group of people in here. Happy evening. No one says that. Good evening. Good evening. Great to see folks. Hi, Sylvia. I shouldn't say people's names. Hi, person saying hi to me. We're going to get started in just a minute, but thanks for folks who have joined us for our People's Budget teach-in with Long Beach Rising, teach-in 2.0, I should say. And thanks for those of you who joined us from the first one a couple weeks ago, and excited to be dropping some knowledge with y'all on the People's Budget and the budget process as well. We're going to get started in a minute, but great to see some folks already here. I want to welcome you all to say hi to your neighbors, because part of this campaign is also, if we're going to defund the police, we got to build community along with it. So if you want, I invite you in the chat box to select to all panelists and attendees. You should have two options, either just to the panelists or panelists and attendees, but you could say hello to all the panelists and attendees. And if you want to drop the neighborhood you're in or the zip code that you're representing tonight, that way we can get a sense of who's here across the city, that would be dope. So welcome to you to say hi to folks. And we'll get started in a little bit. What up, 90808? All right. And for those of you watching on Facebook, welcome you to do the same and say hello on our comment thread on Facebook as well. And let us know what neighborhood you're watching from, where you're staying safe at home, quarantining, not spreading the Rona. All right, I am loving it. We got a good amount, we got a lot of people in here. All right. In case you missed it, I was inviting folks in the chat box. You can share to all panelists and attendees. Give us a good hello, good evening, good afternoon, good whatever time it is. Time is a construct, it's not real, y'all. Go ahead and drop a hi, hello. Let us know what neighborhood you're from, city council district. If you know it, you get bonus points if you know your city council district. Or drop your zip code as well, because like I said before, if we out here trying to defund the police, we got to build some community with it too. So, but great to see so many folks that I recognize, but also so many people I don't, which is super exciting. And if there are those of you watching on the Facebooks, hi out there to you. Thanks for sharing this. Feel free to join us in the comments as well. We got organizers watching those as well. So if y'all pop some questions in there, we'll be able to make sure that we get those in there. Hi, everyone. So good to see y'all. I don't have enough time in the day to call all y'all. So this is great. This is just, we're going to catch up this way and just find me at teach-ins. I'm doing well, in case you're wondering. And if you're on Zoom, if you're joining us on Zoom, we, of course, have our chat feature that can use to talk about, for any commentary that you want to add. We also have a Q&A function. If you're not familiar with our Zoom format, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can use that to pop in a specific question related to the content that we're talking about. And our handy team of organizers who are behind the scenes here are going to help flag that and make sure we get y'all answers. And we'll do a lot of follow-up. We're going to make sure that we give folks a copy to the recording of this as well. That way we get this information out there and spread it far and wide, because we got a world to win, or at least the greater Long Beach area to win. So feel free to use the Q&A function as we're going through that. But we're gonna go ahead and get started. I know I was like, we're gonna start on time. Avi didn't do that, but we're gonna starting now because we're pushing 50 folks here. That's great. So thanks everybody for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is James. I am with Long Beach Forward and one of the organizers with the People's Budget Coalition. We are a group of community organizations and people working in solidarity and alongside Black Lives Matter Long Beach and a whole host of other organizations that are pushing for the adoption of the People's Budget in the city of Long Beach. And that also includes, and essential to that is defunding the Long Beach Police Department and actually reinvesting those resources into priorities and programs and strategies that actually keep our communities safe and invest in Black and Brown communities. So I'm excited and thank you again for joining us for this Long Beach Rising People's Budget Teach-In 2.0. I'm excited to, if you haven't already, feel free to welcome yourself and introduce yourself in the chat. And we got folks sharing the neighborhood that they're in. So I'm seeing like everyone represented here. We got a lot of, we got like Rose Park, we got Alamitos Beach. We got a lot of District 2 folks. I see some North Pine neighborhoods over here. We got a lot of North Side folks too. And some District 3, all right. And West Long Beach, I'm seeing that's East Side, all right. East Side, right? Y'all know what I mean when I say East Side, not East Long Beach, East Side. And yeah, we got a lot of folks all around, so thank you so much. You can keep dropping that in. A lot of organizations here as well. I see y'all, Gray Panthers, that's awesome. So like I said, this is a joint event with the People's Budget Campaign and Long Beach Rising. We want to give a big shout out first and foremost to all the organizations that are pitching in on this effort. You saw their logos on the first slide. But we are doing this and co-hosting this with the Long Beach Coalition for Good Jobs in a Healthy Community. You're gonna meet Elsa in a little bit, who is our presenter, my co-conspirator at Long Beach Forward as well. But a huge thanks to the Advancement Project California for helping put together this data, because part of our work to actually achieve social change is absolutely organizing, but we also need the data and the info to go with that and spread this community knowledge. So huge shout out to them for helping us pull that together. So a little bit about what we're gonna get into and with this People's Budget campaign and also the teach-in. You know, if you've been on our last teach-in before, we talked about how we're at a real critical juncture in our city's history, right? And in our nation's history, really, where amid a global pandemic, these racial uprisings, we're all bearing witness again to these systemic oppressions that are driven by multiple things, right? Not just racism, but also specifically capitalism and white supremacy, right? And I think for this time where there's so many conversations that we've been in and with each other, with our family members, with community members, about how we're seeing this so naked and bare for people, right? And I think we're all intimately feeling this, whether we are just trying to stay safe and healthy at home, or whether those of us have been impacted by this economic recession as well. So we are in an incredible and unprecedented period of time, but that means that now is the time for a bold change that puts Black lives at the center and prioritizes communities first. So as part of this movement, we are a coalition of community organizations that are coming together to reimagine community safety, prioritize community demands, and create the Long Beach People's Budget. And we're building off of work that's happened over the past 2 years. And I know many of you who are here right now have been alongside us in that, been involved in that, and can talk about the wins around language access, around the Long Beach Justice Fund, around so many different pieces, even with housing, right? Where we've been able to contribute that, all because of people power, right? It wasn't because like, hey, that's a cool idea, let's just do that. Like we had to fight and we won these things, right? Because of stuff like what's happening, like literally right now behind me outside City Hall, right? So that's people coming together and being able to do this. So tonight, we're not going to talk about the specific demands listed in the People's Budget, but you can go ahead and read and download the People's Budget from the website. The link is right there on the screen, lbforward.org/peoples-budget. You can download it's a one pager, even though if you print it out double-sided, it's a one pager, it counts. And you can download the People's Budget proposal. I want to encourage you, if you haven't already, tweet it out, post it, share it, DM it to people, because we need to make sure that we're building broad community support on this. Because the mayor and city council, city manager, have not released their budget proposal yet. So we want to make sure that when that time comes, that the community is ready and that we're watching. So with that, I will turn it over to Elsa, who's going to go through tonight's agenda and the rest of the presentation. So Elsa, take it away.
Awesome. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, spending your Wednesday evening with us. Really excited to have you here. So as James said, we're not going to go through specifically the people's budget, but what we are going through is how do we actually pass this thing? We have to understand the city budget process in order to know how do we do this defunding police. How do we get our demands not only heard but adopted? So tonight we're going through understanding the Long Beach City budget, analyzing budget services, which is pretty wonky, but we're going to get into really like how the city allocates money, the budget process, which is the sort of governmental and legislative process. We're going to set aside a good chunk of time for Q&A. And James will help to facilitate that. So please do use the Q&A function if you have specific questions that will help to differentiate and help to lift up your questions. And then at the end, we have, of course, a call to action. So I will get right into it. Understanding the Long Beach City budget. Now, what we're talking about here is Long Beach City here in the center. We're not tonight, at least, we're not talking about the state and federal levels or budgeting, and we're not talking about the school district, Long Beach Unified. These are everywhere, and it's quite exciting these days that budgets are actually getting really incredible attention and scrutiny, as they should. But tonight we're focusing on the city, and the city covers you know, of course, health and housing, youth and parks, an implementation of state and federal dollars, like all of this coronavirus money called the CARES Act that's coming down from the federal government. So it's really, really important for us to understand and target the right people, the right government system for the kinds of changes that we want. This is, you know, basically explaining what is a public budget, what budget advocacy means. So starting at the top left, and this is really a huge and important value statement. Budgets are moral documents, and they tell the story of priorities and gaps in public investments. By understanding how the city funds programs and services, the community can mobilize to push for equity, to push for justice in spending decisions. Budget advocacy is organizing to change the way that our public resources, our taxpayer dollars, are aligned and are spent and are invested in order to meet community needs. Budget advocacy, what we're doing right here on this webinar, can help align the community around a set of core priorities, like the people's budget. So what we're doing right now is core to frankly, to democracy. Now, what is the city budget? Programs and services. A lot of you are already engaged in the city, and thank you so much for being so. But for those who may not be super familiar with, like, you know, what goes on in the city of Long Beach, particularly in terms of city services, the city budget covers youth, parks and recreation programs, library programs, health, wellness and prevention, streets and sidewalks, cleaning and maintenance. By the way, that of course means our trash and recycling services, which are core to just our everyday life. It also includes economic development, small business development, affordable housing, and housing code enforcement, meaning we want to make sure that slumlords are not able to operate here and face their due penalties. And yes, it does also include police, fire, and emergency services. And as we've probably been hearing over and over again the past several weeks, police budgets are enormous. And one would argue, and we will soon see, really, really disproportionate to what other community needs are. So we're going to analyze here now the structure of the budget, where the funding comes from and where the funding goes to. We're going to get into some pie charts, but it should be pretty interesting. So this is the revenue side, where the city budget comes from. And by the way, this is only a pie chart of the general fund, which is the money that the city can use to spend on anything. So it's really important to understand where the money does go. The general fund is the biggest account of the city, but it's not the only account. The city does have several other funds and a large overall budget, but the general fund gives us a really good picture of where flexible money is being spent. And it's really where the advocacy of us, of community advocates, can really target, is the general fund. So as you can see, most of the general fund comes from different kinds of taxes. We've got property tax, sales tax, hotel tax, Measure A, which is also a sales tax, lots of taxes. This big chunk of orange here, that's labeled here as other, and that's because it's basically a bunch of different fines and fees and fund transfers within the city, fund transfers from the county and state governments. So we've kind of looped it all into the category of other, but it's basically fines and fees. Now this is a simplified pie chart to show where the money is going, where the general fund is being spent. And we wanted to simplify it really to kind of make a point. As you can see in orange, the police have the largest share of the general fund at $243 million, 44% of the general fund, nearly half. And by comparison, you see this blue wedge here, $93 million, 17%, so less than half of what the police budget is spent on what we would think of, what the community typically thinks of as the real essential community services. So health, libraries, parks, streets, trash, infrastructure. Again, the real services that touch our day-to-day lives, and where there are definitely disparities in service levels. This little blue wedge is tiny by comparison, not nearly enough for what our communities need. The other departments that's listed, that's sort of compiled together in gray, that forms the next biggest chunk, is it's mostly fire and basically general government. So that means basically the city manager's office, the city council, sort of the general governmental administrative departments. That's mostly what it consists of. So yeah, I mean, so you can see basically this tiny little wedge is what we consider real community services, direct community services that benefit directly our communities. Policing is more than double that. So because policing is obviously such a big and an important topic these days, wanted to dig in just a little bit. This is literally scratching the surface. There's so much more to dig into, but we just wanted to offer you a glance of the LBPD budget. 243 million, again, from the pie chart, is the police budget from the general fund. But the police budget is actually a little bit bigger than that. They do get revenue from other sources. So the total police budget, or this is for last year or this current fiscal year, is 264 million. Of that, 224 million is spent on salaries, benefits, and overtime. That's 85% of the total police budget is basically spent on personnel. Not necessarily all officers. Obviously, there's a lot of civil servants. But personnel, 224 million, 85% of the total budget. If you look at this last point here, this is research uncovered by the Vera Institute of Justice, which looked at data from 2018 and noticed that 80% of the approximately 13,000 arrests made by LBPD were for low-level non-violent offenses. Arrests are often made in response to situations that do not actually require police presence. So if we look at these numbers and we also consider that a lot of stuff is happening that of course does not require police to handle it, we really get a sense of how bloated the police budget is and how bloated, in particularly at 85%, how bloated the personnel budget is. And again, on this, we have a lot more to uncover. We are continuing to do more analysis. Stay tuned, basically. And please do also contribute if you are interested in digging into these numbers. Please let us know. And definitely shoot your questions into the Q&A box if you do have questions. So now we're going to head into the budget process. We got a little bit of the dollars, but now we're heading into the process. The process is also often as sort of the police budget in and of itself. The process is a bit opaque as well. Who we have here are the different entities who are decision makers. We've got individuals as well as entities. So on the left side here, we have the elected officials. Robert Garcia, of course, our mayor, and the city council, our elected legislative body. On the right side is our appointed officials and also civil service and city staff. All of these entities work together very closely in the budget process. So let's start with the mayor real quick. The mayor proposes the annual budget priorities. And so throughout the year, he will work directly with the city manager, Tom Modica, to prepare the budget that will ultimately go to city council for consideration. Tom Modica here on the upper right, the city manager, he is a powerful player, or this position is a powerful position that advises the mayor and the city council. The city manager plays a key role in deciding the size and the scale of budget programs. So really key stakeholder here and decision maker here on the budget. The departments are, of course, they're the sort of city departments that we know: public works, development services. They implement the policies and strategies of the mayor and the council. And so their role in the budget process is to estimate their needs, which are then reviewed by the city manager, the mayor, and ultimately the city council. So they basically recommend, hey, this is what we need for this upcoming fiscal year. And so the process starts. City council, many of us are probably quite familiar with them. We have a 9-member city council. The council, of course, adopts or modifies the budget that's proposed by the mayor, and then provides the funds, equipment, and supplies for all of the budgetary departments. The city council has a budget oversight committee. That's where a lot of budget decisions are made. We will get much more into that in a bit. There's some really interesting story around the budget oversight committee. Here's a slide around the timeline. I won't get like super detailed, but just so you know, our Long Beach fiscal year, we actually follow the federal fiscal year. So we go from October 1st to September 30th. That is our budget year. So budgets typically start in December of the calendar year before, where the mayor, city council, mayor, city manager, city council meet to discuss priorities. Conversations with departments are happening, and so the city manager provides an initial framework, December through March. In April, let me back up for a second. Ideally, this is really the point that the December and early year timeframe is really where budget advocacy should start. This is the beginning of the process, and we, whether it's the People's Budget Coalition or anybody from the public, any resident of Long Beach, should be able to engage in the budget process at the very, very beginning. In April, departments complete their recommendations and submit a framework for their budget. May through July, that's basically where we are now. Obviously, we're in July. So during this time, the mayor, city manager, and council, they confirm their priorities from the early December period, and they conclude their outcomes, they conclude their conversations with departments. So they basically start to kind of finalize their own budget release, the city manager and the mayor. And so this is where advocacy, and this is right where we are right now at this time frame, advocacy is going to ramp up with the mayor, with the city manager, and the city council. Now in August, early August, and we're hearing August 4th for this year, the mayor releases the proposed budget. And then the council starts a deliberation process where they hold special hearings and also hold meetings of the Budget Oversight Committee. Council here submits their tweaks, their recommendations, their changes, whatever changes they want to see from the budget that's released in early August. This is when it happens. And so this is when also, certainly typically in non-coronavirus times, there are public council meetings. There are, as we'll see later, there are community meetings in August where residents can voice their opinion through public comment. So here, advocacy is full steam ahead. And then finally, by September 15th, the city council has to adopt the budget. The mayor has 5 days to approve it. And it must be adopted by September 30th in order to be online for the October 1st start of the fiscal year. So this year, obviously, because of COVID, the process has already been impacted. Budget estimates are changing regularly, so the data is really kind of unclear these days, and timelines are shifting. The budget will definitely be adopted in September, so it is still a core advocacy time right now, but we should expect several rounds of changes through the fall and the end of the year. So now that we've gone through the timeline, let's take a closer look, as I mentioned before, at the Budget Oversight Committee. It's the City Council Committee that oversees the annual budget and makes recommendations to the full council on how to spend and balance the city's funds. So it is a 3-member committee. But here's where it's interesting. So historically, which council districts have been represented on the Budget Oversight Committee? We did an analysis. This is last year's numbers, but it's still relevant this year. The BOC was founded in 2003, and since then, District 3 has held the most number of years on that committee. 12 years, it's about basically 75% on that committee. Districts 2, 4, and 5 come in at a close second. Districts 6, 7, and 8 are pretty low down there. And maybe surprisingly or not surprisingly, Districts 1 and District 9 have had no representation at all in the budget committee. So for those of us who kind of are familiar with the concentrations of say wealth and poverty and communities of color in the city, this is probably not surprising, but here is why this matters. So on the left, on the left is of course the council district map. On the right is basically the concentrations of low-income communities of color. Specifically, it's people of color at a poverty rate of at least 15%. So you'll see that, and this will come as no surprise to many of us, but districts 3, 4, and 5 are the wealthier and predominantly white communities in East Long Beach. Districts 1, 6, 9, 7, and 9 include primarily low-income communities of color in Central, West, and North Long Beach. And so when it comes to making decisions on where and how to spend the city's money and the city's general fund, wealthier and wider communities have been overrepresented. Low-income communities of color, Black communities and communities of color have been underrepresented. So this has helped to perpetuate inequality based specifically on race and class. This is part of the structural racism of the city of Long Beach. And it's changed just in the last month because of the racial justice protests and uprisings, because of movements like Black Lives Matter, and because of the public attention and scrutiny on budgets. The former BOC Budget Oversight Committee chair was Stacey Mungo. She resigned her chairmanship. The mayor appointed Councilman Al Austin, who was an existing member already, but he appointed him to be chair. Susie Price from District 3 is vice chair. She, I believe, is continuing in that role as vice chair. She has been a member of this committee for several years. And new member is Councilman Roberto Uranga from District 7. I'm brand new member to this committee. So this shift has happened. It's a slight shift. Basically 2 of the 3 members who were on there before are still on there. But it's interesting. It's not coincidental that this shift happened in this particular moment. And so now a final note on the budget process. The city does offer a few ways for the public to quote unquote participate. In July, the city invites the public to fill out a survey to rank how important the different city services are. Year after year, the city puts out this survey, but there's really no indication that the survey results have any meaningful impact on the budget. If you've seen the survey, I don't know, it's not, at least in my personal opinion, it's not really meaningful. It's just sort of asking how important these services are to you. In August, as I alluded to before, the city hosts community meetings in each council district to introduce the budget to residents. But August is way too late in the process for the city to just be starting these conversations and starting to engage the community. By this point, the budget is already mostly baked, and there's no indication that these community meetings have any meaningful impact on the budget. And so new this year, in 2020, of course, given our moment, a new process has emerged over the last several weeks, the city's framework for reconciliation, which is meant to listen to the community about racial injustice. But it remains to be seen whether this new process will have any meaningful impact on the budget remains to be seen. The bottom line is that the city's dedicated avenues for the public to participate do not actually allow for meaningful participation in the budget process. And it doesn't get us anywhere near where we need to be in terms of equity and justice. So it is we, the community, who have to organize to make our voices heard on the city budget. I will go ahead and pause there and invite James to help us transition to questions. I'm happy to backtrack into any slides to refer to any of the points or data. So thanks so much and look forward to hearing your questions.
All right, thank you, Elsa. I was like engaging in the chat too, so there was some really good stuff going back and forth. If you have specific questions about the content that Elsa presented or anything like that, feel free to pop those into the Q&A. You can put them, it'd be easier for us to see in the Q&A function. And if you have those, if you're on Facebook out there, you can drop them on the thread too. And we got some organizers out there monitoring those. A couple things that folks have brought up that I do want to address while you answer any other questions or any other thoughts too, is that, and yes, this is some very powerful information, and we want to make sure that this information gets out there. So, you know, I would challenge you all too to think about at least 2 people within your network, whether they are friends, family members, shoot, your cat, your dog. Everybody got a dog in Long Beach who needs to know this information, and that you can share that with them. That is how we are going to multiply and win this thing. We are going to make these slides available after the presentation. They'll be posted up on our website. But some of the questions around, you know, the differences we had early on around the sources of the general fund, which compared to the rest of the city budget, and that was kind of at the beginning. So one of the things that's important about the city budget, and perhaps Assad or Elsa can talk a little bit more about this, is the differentiation between restricted funds and unrestricted funds, and those unrestricted funds mostly being the general fund. And so certainly there are other ways to look at ways that changing how funds are restricted, but that may not necessarily be within the time constraints of this current budget cycle. But do one of you, Elsa or Assad, want to break down the restricted funds a little bit more?
So I'll definitely invite Assad, and he's been sort of in the background, but Assad is our colleague and partner from Advancement Project California, who did put together a lot of this data. Assad, if you're online, it'd be great if you could answer the question. I guess, James, the question is, what does it mean for a restricted budget versus the unrestricted general fund?
Yeah, we had some questions just around like, you know, we talked about targeting the general fund because that's what the city council changes or can divvy up every year. But you know, where is there room, I guess, for also like some of these restricted funds through other processes to change how that money is restricted or where that money goes?
Yeah, sure. I'm more than happy to contribute, folks. Nice meeting everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. So the reason why we focus on the general fund, because the best way to put it, those are flexible dollars. The city's total budget, it's $2.8 billion, but it includes the port, it includes oil and gas revenue, and revenue created from those agencies is tied to those expenditures. So you can't move dollars out of the port and try and build a park or try and fund youth development programs. We focus on the general fund because this is money that you can spend anywhere. And when you look at this pie chart, we really see where the priorities have been. And in previous presentations, we've seen this consistent trajectory of spending over the last 15 years. And so for advocacy purposes, this is money that could be, you know, reprogrammed year to year. And so we try to focus on this pot just to make it easier for folks to actually identify what their needs are and identify flexible resources that can fill those gaps that have been created.
Great. I had a couple other questions, and you know, and share, and just I want to reiterate too, as these questions are coming in, these are also great topics for us to like research more or share information. And if you're interested in helping with that, give us a shout out in the chat, and we'd love to connect with you. But we want to be able to make put out more of this information as well. So that would be awesome. This information is going to be available in Spanish. We are actually literally in 20 minutes going to do the same presentation in Spanish, and it's going to be live streamed over the Long Beach Forward Facebook page and the Long Beach Immigrant Rights Coalition Facebook page. So that and the slides and everything will be in Spanish right after this. And then we will also post those materials in Spanish as well. So we are working on sharing that as well. If anybody wants to drop some Khmer knowledge too, we'd love to connect with you. So don't have many of these materials in Khmer. But here's a great question. What happens to unused funds for the fiscal year? So say the city council approves a budget of X amount, but the department only spends a certain amount. What happens to those unused funds?
Asad, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So again, this does become a question of restricted and unrestricted funding. So if you look at this pie chart and a department does not spend down a certain pot of dollars, if it's unrestricted general fund, the department can reprogram it any way they want. And throughout the year, there are mid-year check-ins. And so the city council, the mayor's office, the city manager, the Department of Finance are constantly tracking where there's savings, where are there increased costs, and making adjustments. Granted, general fund dollars could be mixed, could be shifted in different places. Oftentimes, departments do find other areas where investments can be made. Restricted dollars cannot. And so even if there's a savings, so let's just say if it's community development block grant dollars, so that's a restricted fund, you can't just transfer that easily into the health department out of parks. It's got to align with some type of expenditure plan. And so it's always good to track those mid-year updates to figure out what's carryover. Or they might say, you know what, we can save it and spend it next year for a future expense. So there are a lot of different prisms into how those dollars could be spent. And that's why tracking the Budget Oversight Committee, that's why being in communication about your goals and priorities with your policymakers is important, because that's the kind of stuff that can really add up and build some momentum for future goals.
Sweet. Another Assad question. I actually will be impressed if you know this off the top of your head. What is the city's total budget?
It's 2.8 billion.
That is so cool. Man after my own heart. So 2.8 billion is the entire city budget, and that includes the restricted and unrestricted funds. So when you're seeing this figure that's on the slide right now of the 556 million, that's just the general fund.
Yep, exactly.
Great. Let's see. We have a couple questions around what's the plan to change these budget priorities? How are we going to move police funding to more community support funding? The answer is the people's budget. So I would really encourage you, if you have not already, to go online and download the people's budget document that outlines exactly what we mean when we say defund the police and move that money into community priorities. Things like reimagining community safety that's grounded in restorative justice and Black empowerment. It means right to counsel for renters, renewing the justice fund, language access, safe and affordable housing, community health councils. All those pieces are outlined there. And if you want to get more involved, send us a message because we need your help and we need your support. There's another question about, are there numbers on the type of crimes that occur in Long Beach? And a big theoretical question, do we need police to address all these different types of crime? So is there more information about the specific types of crime that we're talking about in Long Beach?
So I believe there are data portals available. I don't have the one on top of my head, James, or we can definitely get back to folks and figure out where they can find that information.
Yeah, and I will say we are working with an ally organization to get some more exciting numbers on the police budget, and that's all I'm going to say, so stay tuned. So yeah, that would be awesome. Here's another question. Are there any departments, are any of the departments expected to fund the general fund or their own department with fees or fines, such as like building permits or code enforcement violations or grants like the health department?
Yeah, so a lot of the fees that the departments collect actually go into their own operations, and so there might be fees from the planning department, building and safety, park permits. Those are all sort of redistributed, and I don't have the exact percentages, but they do go back into the department that operates those services, and so those are restricted. In a way, they're restricted because they're generated for a specific purpose, not a citywide purpose, and they go into specific departments. And the budget actually has those resources broken down on where revenue sources came from. So if you want details on a specific department, feel free to give us an email and we can get you that information.
Sweet. Here's a good question. I'm no shame in my game. I definitely Googled this word. Can Long Beach encumber funds to avoid losing their budgets in the next year?
Can you rephrase that, James? I'm trying to.
Yeah, I think
Exactly. Yeah.
the question is asking, like, if a department doesn't spend all their money, can they keep some of those funds to use in the next fiscal year?
Yeah, hypothetically, yeah, there could be. It's a concept of sort of carryover dollars, where if there's a savings this year, but there's probably an expenditure in future years, there's a way to sort of carry those dollars over. That's reported in mid-year updates. I think most departments do spend down what they are budgeted, and there might be something missing because you couldn't hire someone, or there might have been a mix-up, but there is a way to sort of reprogram those throughout the year.
Great. Let's see. This one's an interesting one. I don't know if there is an answer to this. Do we know of any other models that project revenue loss on property tax due to sea level rise?
That's a great question. I do not know the answer to that. I think there have been some reports and research on the impact of sea level and what that could have on housing, which can then lead into property tax issues, but don't have details on that. So we can get back to you on some stuff with that.
Great.
Well, I also wonder if some of the folks here, I do recognize some names in the room. If folks want to take a stab at that question in the chat, feel free. We do have some climate folks definitely in the room.
All right, we got time for just maybe like 2 more questions here. And what we'll do is we'll send out, similar to what we did with the first people's budget, we'll send out a follow-up document with as much answers written down so folks can revisit some of this info as well, and you can share that with folks even if they weren't able to make it to this one. This stream is available. It is up on our YouTube page at Long Beach Forward or our Facebook page. It will stay there forever in all perpetual glory. So you can please feel free to share that. Or if you just miss us tomorrow and want to watch it again, you can do that. Host a watch party with your roommates. That's always good. I'll probably make my roommate do that so you can always learn more. There's a really great question about, are there other cities that we can look to that have successfully moved significant funding away from the police and into community priorities? I will say I am a big fan in my ever-ending quest to make everyone an abolitionist of Alex Vitale, who's an amazing author and scholar, researcher around police abolition and reimagining priorities. He's done a lot of research and has a lot of great articles around how we can move some of these pieces away. So he's done a lot of research of looking at some cities that have certain models. But I will also say, like, this is new territory and this is new terrain, right? We've seen in LA, there was a recent motion to actually start moving money away from the police budget. And I think one thing we have to keep in mind too, that I guarantee you that we will see, is that, there will be cuts to the police department. The city council in Long Beach has already said this, but we know there were cuts becoming because of the pandemic, right? And so we want to be really clear that we're talking about defunding the police, not just because of the recession, but because we're reimagining how we actually keep our communities safe and putting that money towards these priorities, right? So this is really new territory and new terrain. So there's a lot of, the tired phrase of the devil's in the details, but a lot of really interesting information that's coming out about how people and cities are navigating these challenges as well. So we'll try and share some of that information, but if you want to Google Alex Vitale, I'll drop his name in the chat. He's a lot of really great stuff that is very accessible to folks to read. He's also the author of The End of Policing. So you can check that out if you want some bedtime reading. Lastly, I know we're not getting to all the questions. I apologize. Just want to emphasize this too, because we talked about this earlier. Why is our focus exclusively on the general fund when it's only 25% of the total fiscal picture? And that's because the general fund is the unrestricted funds that we actually have power to move around within the city budget process. All the other 75% of those funds are already dedicated to where they go, and the city council is not able to make a vote or a motion to change where those dollars go to. So that is why we're focusing on the general fund there. So with that, I recognize, I want to acknowledge there's other questions. Thank you all for being able to participate in that, but I want to make sure that we have time to move into our next piece, our last piece, which Elsa's flying us through the slides here. So I want to encourage you all to take action, because that is the most important part, because just as thank you, we are learning, analyzing, and raising hell together. Say it louder from the rooftops, because don't go outside because coronavirus. So we want you all and encourage you to take action, join the People's Budget Campaign by helping us spread the word. And I can't emphasize this enough. You know, if you're scared to talk to people about this, practice with your cat or dog, right? And they will hopefully not shun you, but we really need folks to help spread the word, spread this message, and talk to people about how we can start reimagining ways things can be different, because it's clear from this moment that we're in, if the police department is committing violence against one Black life or 20, it doesn't work, right? And we want to be really clear about that. And so the People's Budget is a way for us to offer that alternative vision, and do that by following the lead of Black and Brown communities in Long Beach. So we also want to encourage you to endorse the People's Budget. You can do that at the website lbforward.org/peoples-budget. We're going to be doing more teach-ins and future actions as well. We just had a big action this past Saturday. So you can check the video out from that on our Facebook page as well. So just as long as you endorse, we'll add you to our mailing list, get you signed up, so you can stay up to date about the next actions. But the biggest one, of course, we got to tell decision makers what the people want. And so we want to encourage you to call, email, or tag on social media the city officials, telling them to defund LBPD and support the People's Budget LB. And as much as you can, post on social media using the hashtags, engage folks who are drawing in on this conversation. The things I've seen so far have been absolute fire. And so just as one of our attendees mentioned, that we do this together, and that's how we win. So with our last slide. Oh, cool, thank you. All right, well, thank you everyone. I really appreciate you all for coming. I was like, what's the talking point for this one? Pretty easy, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Like I said, we're gonna post all this information up online, and you can share it and relive the magic on Facebook and YouTube as well. If you're interested, or you're bilingual, we're going to be doing the same presentation in 5 minutes and 6 minutes via the Long Beach Forward Facebook page and the LBIRC Facebook page, all in Espanol. So if you want to join us for that and share that with other folks, please do. I hope to see you out in the streets, in the Zooms, in the teach-ins, and all the things. Please spread the word, and thank you so much for learning with us tonight. You earned it. Go treat yourself. Go do something nice for yourself, because you just learned a lot of information. And thanks to all the folks, Elsa, Assad, the Long Beach Coalition for Good Jobs for helping organize this tonight. Sweet. Thanks, everyone. Let's get to work. Work, 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 work. Thanks, Elsa. And thanks, Assad.
Thanks, James, for serenading us out.
I do what I can for the movement.
Thank you.